Financial leaders from around the world have been discussing the future of global finance at the annual meeting of the World Bank and the IMF in Peru. In addition to as their summit, CCTV's Dan Collyns joins us now live from Lima to look back at a week in global economics. Dan?
Hello, Jessica. Well, someone once said, a week in politics is a long time. Well, this last week in global economics may have seemed long for some 12,000 delegates and officials from more than 180 countries as they learned how there is a global economic slowdown and how it's going to affect particularly emerging economies.
The skies had been overcast, but the sun emerged just as delegates were headed home. All of them aware that their economies may be in for some heavy weather. The driving factor, the slower rhythm of China's economy.
A growth model that is no longer based on either massive export relative to domestic, massive investment project as opposed to consumption, is a good transition.
China's growth target this year is about 7%, less than the double-digit figures of the past, but well ahead of the global average. Even host nation Peru, once the economic star of the region, was feeling the squeeze. Its finance minister told CCTV.
This has been the longest, most prolonged and the deepest decline in our basket of commodity prices, the overall basket, in history probably, at least in the last 65 years.
Like many other emerging economies, Peru could have done more during the boom, he admits.
I think we could have been more active in terms of, as you mentioned, diversifying the economy. We're doing that now. We are many different areas. The first one is we're investing strongly first in human capital, more than ever. We need to elevate educational standards to prepare for a world that is increasingly competitive.
Peru's goals coincide with those of many emerging economies and those set out by the World Bank. The World Bank president urged reforms to halt a backslide in record-low global poverty.
Our overarching strategy, based on more than 50 years of experience, is that three things must happen: inclusive economic growth, investment in human beings, and insurance against the risk that people might fall back into poverty. We summarize this in three words: grow, invest, insure.
It's not all doom and gloom. The IMF is still forecasting global growth at 3.1% this year.
Well, Jessica, the economic recovery continues, according to economic leaders here. They just say it's going to be slower. But what's clear is that the commodity supercycle, as it's known, which has been around for the last 10 to 15 years and has benefited greatly emerging economies, pulling millions out of poverty, has come to an end. And we might be seeing the beginning, if the financial leaders have their way, of a new era in which sustainable growth and low-carbon economies start to take hold. And that's been very much backed by Christine Lagarde of the IMF and Jim Yong Kim, the president of the World Bank, who have been stressing that there's a need for carbon taxes and that tax to be used to help renewable energy alternatives, and also an end to fuel subsidies. They're estimated to amount to some $3 trillion a year. And so they're calling for an end to that, to gradually get these economies around the world, particularly emerging economies, moving towards a low-carbon future.
Yeah, a lot of climate focus.
This is really how climate change...
A lot of climate focus there at those meetings, but also one on the migrant crisis, of course, which is hitting Europe. Tell us about what finance ministers there are recommending, how to cope with that.
Well, Dr. Kim of the World Bank has been particularly outspoken here. He says, I'm a migrant. He's, as many people know, the audience will know, a Korean-American doctor by profession who grew up in Utah. He says that this is a moral responsibility for richer countries to give refuge to migrants, many of whom are fleeing war in many cases. And he's also said that get used to it. This is the future for richer countries. The migration that we're seeing to Europe at the moment is going to be the future for richer countries around the world. And he said, well, it could be a good option as well to boost economic growth and reduce poverty. Those people fleeing from poorer countries will be able to get jobs in richer countries, and they're all the younger population, the younger demographic, if you like, of the migrants will help change the demographic in richer countries where generally the populations are shrinking and are generally older. So they'll add to the workforce and boost economic growth. So clearly a positive take on the migrant crisis, but also stressing that richer countries have a moral responsibility to help these people.
Our Dan Collyns live for us in Lima.